Every part-timer has to work 2 or 3 jobs to make a living. Well, I mean, that's why I left years ago. I couldn't work 3 part-time jobs and take care of my children as a single mom. Now, coming back, the schedule is so inconsistent. It could be...
In high-profile negotiations over the past month, UPS Teamsters have won several tentative agreements on key issues. Two-tier work among drivers will end. Air conditioning will be put in new package trucks, and forced overtime will be curtailed. However, on July 5th, negotiations halted over one crucial issue: raising the poverty wages of part-time UPS workers. But full-timers and part-timers together are threatening to strike if UPS doesn't pay up.
So many drivers started in preload or started in the sort and have that experience. And they understand the oppression and the stress and strain of working at UPS part-time.
We all have families. We meet people across the nation, talk to them. All they have to do, talk to everybody, tell everybody how UPS does you.
Unity and solidarity are the strengths of the labor movement. And with them, UPS workers may just win the battle for hearts and minds. Hello, my name is Teddy Ostro. Welcome to the Upsurge, a podcast about UPS, the Teamsters, and the future of the American labor movement. This podcast unpacks the unprecedented labor fight this year at UPS. At the end of this month, the contract of over 340,000 UPS workers will expire. And if those workers strike, which is a real possibility, it will be the second largest strike against a single company in U.S. history. The Upsurge is produced in partnership with In These Times and the Real News Network. Both are nonprofit media organizations that cover the labor movement closely. Check them out at inthesetimes.com and therealnews.com, where you can also find an archive of all our past episodes. You may have noticed a slight tweak to our intro from previous episodes. Friend and previous guest of the show, Barry Eidlin, brought to our attention that a UPS strike in 2023 would not be the largest strike against a single employer in U.S. history, as we and mainstream media have been trumpeting. Rather, it would be the second largest strike of the sort. The largest single employer strike was actually the one at General Motors in 1970, involving 400,000 UAW auto workers. It's truly mind-boggling to think there were that many UAW members at just one company at the time. I'll throw the article Barry sent me about the strike in the description of the show. Something Barry emphasized to me personally and later online is that this doesn't detract at all from how important the potential UPS strike is for today's labor movement. And to move forward, we need to ground ourselves in accurate historical record. So I'm sorry that I have boosted that inaccuracy. And now for our short episodic plea. We are a listener-funded podcast. We cannot do this work without you. We are almost at 100 monthly patrons. This podcast takes a lot of work, so please, if you like the show and you have a few bucks to spare every month, please help us out by heading over to patreon.com/upsurgepod and becoming a supporter today. You can find the link in the description. I'll repeat, keeping the show going after the UPS fight is certainly in the cards, but it depends on your support. One last thing. The Upsurge will be doing a live stream next week on Tuesday, July 25th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time with our partners, the Real News Network and In These Times. We will be speaking with 4 Teamsters about the past year, what's been going on now in the contract campaign, and all of the demands and issues that we've been covering on the Upsurge over the past 7 months. I will be co-hosting it alongside Maximilian Alvarez, the editor-in-chief of The Real News. You'll be able to tune in at their YouTube channel, and the video will be posted on the websites of In These Times and The Real News. You will also be able to hear the audio on the podcast streams of the Upsurge and The Real News Network. So please join us live or tune in after the show next week. It's going to be an exciting live stream. All right, on to the show. This week is an update episode on the state of the contract campaign and negotiations. The Teamsters and UPS will return to the bargaining table next week after 2 weeks of hiatus. First, we'll bring you to one of the several rallies that were happening at Teamsters locals around the country in the meantime. I drove over to Long Island from my hometown of Brooklyn, New York, to hear from UPS workers, as well as Teamsters General President Shawn O'Brien, Representative Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, and the new president of the UAW, Shawn Fain. Next, Rand Wilson, the Teamsters for a Democratic Union organizer from episode 2, returns to the show, alongside Misty Baker, a 10-year part-time UPS worker worker out of Local 651 in Lexington, Kentucky. You'll hear about the organizing going on around the country, the remaining issues in contract negotiations, and the propaganda UPS is putting out to pit worker against worker and worker against consumer. Before we get to all that, let's take a ride to Long Island, New York.
Who are we? Teamsters! Who are we? Teamsters!
Over the past 2 weeks, the Teamsters have upped the ante on practice pickets, parking lot meetings, trainings, webinars, and rallies to put pressure on UPS and make the strike threat of 340,000 workers credible. UPSers are also drumming up public support. Drivers are running their regular routes to inform their customers of what's going on and to ask them to stand in solidarity with the Teamsters. The union announced on July 19th that negotiations will resume the following week, and a deal that will prevent a strike is certainly still possible. But since negotiations broke down on July 5th, specifically over the wages of part-time workers, Sean O'Brien and General Secretary-Treasurer Fred Zuckerman have been touring UPS facilities and Teamsters locals around the country to rally the rank and file and to preach unity at this critical moment leading up to July 31st. One of their stops was in Long Island, New York, to rally with UPS Teamsters from Local 804, so I hopped in my mom's car and drove to the Union Hall of Local 282 in New Hyde Park, where the rally was being held. When I arrived, there was a kind of giddiness in the air. The main hall of the local quickly got packed with Teamsters from various locals, as well as United Auto workers, Starbucks workers, and others who attended in solidarity. Mind you, this was only one day after 160,000 screen actors, represented by SAG-AFTRA, launched their own strike, joining over 11,000 writers of the WGA and 15,000 hotel workers of Unite here on the picket line. Something is happening. Corporate America is pleading poverty, but workers around the country are calling their BS.
Yeah. And they're trying to say that we can't afford part-timers to pay them a living wage? I don't think so. I don't think so.
One of the rally's esteemed speakers, Representative Alexandria Ocasio Cortez from New York.
However, we know that if it wasn't for you all standing up, that is always the nexus. If we don't stand up for ourselves, no one will stand up for us. Okay? No one will stand up for us. You all are the essential ingredient. Your courage is the essential ingredient to this. Your solidarity is the essential ingredient to this. And what we're here to do is to make sure that we're able to go out and organize the rest of our communities, our constituencies. And I can tell you that New York's 14th congressional district in the Bronx and Queens, everybody has your back in this. Everybody does. So keep it up, keep going, and we are incredibly excited to have your back. Let's remind them who's actually boss in this, and that's the workers. Thank you.
Next on the podium was Sean O'Brien.
Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We are taking on the biggest organized crime syndicate in the world, white-collar crime syndicate, known as UPS. And I think we're on the verge of having a tremendous victory. If not, we're going to have a tremendous fight. Either way, we're at peace with our decision. Our members have spoken loud, 340,000 deep, 97% strike vote. It's a coincidence that 97% of our members voted to strike. And the last time UPS had a strike was 1997.
As he has on several news broadcasts over the past 2 weeks, O'Brien turned to the linked struggles of part-time and full-time workers at UPS.
For the last two contracts, the one thing that's certain is that our part-timers have been left behind. Our part-timers are the unsung heroes of UPS. Now, the full-timers are very, very important. They're vital in this fight. And, you know, UPS is going around telling everybody our full-timers make $93,000 per year. Well, do the math. How many hours does it take to be away from your family to make $93,000 per year? What they don't tell you is that people are missing Little League games. They're missing dance recitals. They're missing quality time at home. And then what UPS is trying to do in the media right now is saying that the part-timers make $20 an hour. That's the first lie. The second lie they told is that the package car drivers and feeder drivers make $39 an hour, and that the part-timers make $5 less. I said, if that's the case, I'll take that deal right now, right? They suffer from a bad disease that's called diabetes, right? And they need a little Trutzolin. And we are that Trutzolin. This is about the entire labor movement. We have battles going on everywhere right now. This is going to be the biggest one. We provide 6% of supply chain, delivering 6% of goods and services through this country. If UPS chooses to strike themselves because they're greedy and they're loyal to Wall Street, not Main Street, they will throw this country into a recession. And people say to us all the time, well, if you strike UPS, don't you fear you're going to lose jobs? Absolutely, we're going to lose jobs, but you know what? We're in it for a little, there's going to be some short pain for long-term gain. We will come back bigger, faster, stronger.
O'Brien then addressed what's been on many Teamsters' minds since a strike of 115,000 rail workers was preemptively broken last year by Joe Biden and Congress. Will Biden intervene and force UPSers back to work under the Taft-Hartley law?
I've made it clear to the White House that the neighborhood that I grew up in, if two people are fighting in the street, you have nothing to do with it, you keep walking. We will solve our own problems regardless. I can promise you this, regardless of what happens, if anybody tries to limit our ability to strike this company, we are not going to stop. I would rather ask for forgiveness than permission. Now, UPS has to understand, that clock is ticking right now. They have no allies, but they create enemies every single day. And when you create enemies every single day, it makes it harder and harder and harder. We are going to be corporate America's conscience. We are going to win this fight. And I got a message for UPS. Put your helmets on, buckle your chin straps, full contact sport. Thank you very much.
The excitement was infectious on the floor of the hall. Attendees mobbed O'Brien as he left the podium, but I wanted to know what the workers were thinking. Here's Emil Biganov, a driver in Brooklyn from Local 804.
I feel very great to see all the support that we're getting from local officials, from the public, from the other unions. It brings so much energy, and I'm very confident that this leadership that we got now and that we was waiting for this so long, and now it's finally coming through that we're going to see big changes.
Kioma Ferrero, another driver from Brooklyn and an activist with Teamsters for a Democratic Union, said that she's itching for a strike.
I was just saying to the young lady that works with the organization TDU, with all of this ampness, all of this excitement, all of this craziness, and I just want to do it for one day. At least you have to, with all of this energy that's going on right now behind this. I just want to do it for one day. As a worker, like myself, I'm a driver, but I was also a part-timer. You don't want the company to stop because this is the way we feed our family, technically speaking. But sometimes you got to do what you got to do.
Do you feel ready to strike at this point?
If we could have did it tomorrow, oh, hell yeah. I'll get up extra early just to be there early.
You're here with your mom. Are you proud of her? Are you proud of the Teamsters? What are you thinking about?
Yeah, I'm really proud of her because, according to them, a lot of people know her for being really feisty and very passionate about what she does here.
Now, O'Brien wasn't the only labor leader to be mobbed at the rally. Workers were lining up to shake the hand of the other labor Shawn Fain, that is, the new president of the United Auto Workers Union. He and a number of other UAW leaders attended the rally, and it was significant because high-profile negotiations between the UAW and the big three automakers, Ford, GM, and Stellantis, had begun earlier that week. And Fain has made it clear that only a month and a half after Teamsters may strike UPS, he's not afraid to lead 150,000 auto workers out onto the picket line if their demands are not met in new contracts. So I had to ask him. Why was it important for the UAW for you to come here at this time to be with the Teamsters?
hey, the Teamsters fight is our fight. Our fight's got to be theirs. Labor has to come together no matter what sector, no matter what division, no matter what the work is. You look at the Teamsters path, you look at our path, it's parallel. We have the same issues. No matter where you go in a union, it's the same issues. These companies want to pay poverty wages. They want to utilize a temporary workforce with no commitment to anything, and it's got to stop. So we've got to end the tiers. We've got to get economic justice for not just our members, but for the working class. And we have an obligation as union leaders to make that happen with our membership. The membership's fed up. The membership at UPS, you can tell, is fed up. We've had a lot of our members going to support the practice pickets and all that they've been doing. And, I'm proud of that. We want our members out there supporting the Teamsters. And if it comes to that for us, then I know we'll get the same thing from them. So that's what it's all about, standing together.
Thank you so much. Now, clearly, the show of unity among Teamsters and the solidarity from other unions, politicians, as well as over 3,000 UPS pilots who are represented by another union but have vowed to not cross the picket line during a strike is all having an effect. The Teamsters and UPS will return to the bargaining table next week, while on July 5th, UPS told the union they had no more money to give. After all the pressure of the past 2 weeks, the corporation noted in a press release, quote, "We are prepared to increase our industry-leading pay and benefits, but need to work quickly to finalize a fair deal that provides certainty for our customers, our employees, and businesses across the country." Unquote. It's important to note that while previously the union has stated that they will strike on August 1st without a ratified contract by the end of the month, it appears now that they are willing to delay a strike if a tentative agreement is reached before then. At that point, it would take roughly 3 weeks for the membership to vote on it. And at this point, really anything could happen. We're at a wait-and-see moment. But prior to the news about negotiations resuming, I spoke with Rand Wilson and Misty Baker about the past 2 weeks when the union has upped their pressure on UPS. You'll remember Rand Wilson from episode 2, one of our most popular episodes, when we covered the 1997 UPS strike. Definitely check it out if you haven't already. Rand was the communications coordinator of the 1997 UPS contract campaign, and now he is an organizer with the organization Teamsters for a Democratic Union. Also joining me was Misty Baker, a rank-and-file part-time UPSer and activist with TDU out of Local 651. I wanted to talk to Rand and Misty in part because much of the heavy lifting of organizing and member education around the country has been pushed by TDU. Misty told me offline that she'd have very little support without the organization. Plus, I wanted to get Misty's perspective as a part-timer at UPS, given that negotiations now hinge on raises for workers like her. Misty Baker and Rand Wilson, welcome to the Upsurge.
Hello.
Hey, great to see you, Teddy.
Maybe we can start with you, Rand. From a bird's eye view, negotiations broke down. The Teamsters are ramping up their pressure on UPS right now. What are we seeing from UPS workers, Teamsters all around the country?
Well, it's been amazing to see the practice picketing and the effort that's being made to bring part-timers and full-timers together for good jobs and to win a contract that's a win for everybody. And the practice picketing has just taken off. I was looking at video footage this morning of members up in Presque Isle, Maine, on the Canadian border, in a tiny UPS center there. And they were practice picketing, and they got great coverage on the local TV station for the work that they're doing. And, rank and file members talking about the importance of unifying membership to come together to win the best possible agreement, hopefully avoiding a strike, but saying that they're ready to strike if necessary. It's very exciting.
Right, and we've also seen rallies as the Teamster leadership have been going around the country. I just went to one in New York, and I believe there's one in Los Angeles today when we're speaking. But Misty, we haven't had you on the show before. Thanks so much for joining us. You guys did a practice picket too over at your local. You're in Lexington, Kentucky. Can you tell us about what the energy's like, what you've been doing to organize, just your general sense? Are you ready to strike the company if you have to?
It is contagious. The energy is very contagious. The picket went well. We have several, we have a Lexington hub, and then we have several smaller hubs outside. So each one has a separate practice picketing. In Lexington in specific, I think it went really well. I think everybody's engaged, most definitely. They're asking questions. A lot of people still have a lot to learn. I mean, part timers is a revolving door. Not a lot of people make a career out of part time at UPS. I hate to say that out loud, but some of us do, some don't. They're learning, and we kind of teach, teamwork makes the dream work. So we all do it together. We're going to stay together. We're going to stick together. We'll blow our whistles together. We'll chant together. Everything's together.
So talks broke down on July 5th, and they broke down over part-time wages specifically. Now this conversation about part-time wages often hinges on starting pay for part-timers, and this is very important, of course. Teamsters for Democratic Union has been pushing for $25 an hour. Sean O'Brien, I saw him at a practice picket last Friday. He told me personally they're pushing for, above 23, but regardless, we're talking right now about raising people out of poverty who are in part-time jobs. Current part-timers and part-timers who also have been at the company for a long time, they're also looking for wages. We're talking about market rate adjustments. These are the raises that UPS is giving starting part-timers around the country in order to compete with other employers. So there's a spectrum of issues right now. And I was hoping, Misty, you've been working part-time on and off for about 10 years. Can you help us understand what part-timers are dealing with? What are the part-timers dealing with on your shift? And what would you guys like to see?
As the chief steward on preload, the biggest issues I hear, I'm this morning, we have a gentleman, several actually, that have been there for 13 years and making $20.80. The part-timers and he's part-time, the part-timers coming in as new hires with the MRA that UPS provides is 18. I know that they put on Facebook or wherever they put all their social media at that, the part-timers are making 20. And in our building, that is not the case. And without the MRA that they can take any time, and they do, they'll take it at their convenience. It gets everybody up in arms, but it's the same. I mean, it's just horrible. It creates division. But without that, our contractual rate would be $16.65. That has to change. And the new contract that was negotiated on in 2018, I don't know if I should say this out loud, but that administration was corrupt. They sold us all out. So now we're asking for catch-up raises. These guys should have got that then. I'm speaking for the people I work with and even myself, like 5 years this time around at UPS, I'm making the same amount of people that have been there 15 years. And that's just not right. We're doing the same work, and it sucks for them. It sucks for me when a new hire comes in the door making the same and more, because they'll give them attendance bonuses on top of that. I know a lot of the part-timers, they want catch-up raises. As far as a specific pay rate, they haven't really clarified, but they'd like to see it 20 or above. And the one thing that they have said is that they don't want the MRAs. If the MRAs come into effect, they need to stay. That UPS shouldn't be able to give and take.
And you also mentioned to me previously that scheduling is an issue. A lot of people work part-time because they can't, work full-time. Some want full-time jobs. There seem to be a range of issues related to this.
Yes, as a part-time employee, when you're hired on at UPS, they tell you, you're guaranteed 3.5 hours. It's normal. Every part-timer has to work 2 or 3 jobs to make a living. Well, I mean, that's why I left years ago. I couldn't work 3 part-time jobs and take care of my children as a single mom. Now, coming back, the schedule is so inconsistent. Well, peak season every year, November through January, you're forced to work 6 days a week. So you have to tell your second and third job, oh, I'm sorry, UPS demands that I work for them. So you lose the job. More than likely, that's what happens. You lose your second job. So the part-timers are constantly, they're rotating second jobs to the point where they won't rehire them. I mean, UPS comes first. If they schedule you to work 3 to 9, well, this week you're going to start at 3:00. Next week you might start at 4. The next month you might start at 1 a.m. It's just, you have to keep your schedule free for them from 12 a.m. to 12 p.m. on my specific shift. Like, they have a very inconsistent schedule. So I actually get tired of hearing, part-time hours, because it's full-time responsibilities at a part-time job, including the inconsistent schedule.
Right. Something I wanted to also talk about with you guys, something important in these critical few weeks before July 31st, especially as negotiations hinge on these part-time wages, what we're talking about. is the unity between part-timers and full-timers who have often been at odds, a consequence, I think, of the company stoking division and the union in previous leadership, perhaps allowing that to happen. Can you guys talk about the unity across classifications that we're seeing and why that's so important?
Well, I think the division is a little overblown. So many drivers started in preload or started in the sort and have that experience. And they understand the oppression and the stress and strain of working at UPS part-time. Sometimes we need to remind some of the longer term guys that from where they came from. And then, a driver depends on a part-time worker to load their truck and to load it correctly. It's not like, oh, you just stuff a bunch of packages into a truck and then the truck takes off. No, it's got to be loaded in a certain order so that route unloads correctly as the driver's making their trip. So drivers have an appreciation for the part-timers, and there's a close relationship, especially between the preload and the driver to get the job done. The issue, I think, is what we have not seen in a long time is the union taking a strong stand on behalf of the part-timers. And what is so exciting right now is to see the National Negotiating Committee and Sean O'Brien and Fred Zuckerman really standing up, and with the whole committee voting unanimously to reject the company's offer on July 5th and take a stand for the part-timers. And, I think it's resonating with the public that the part-timers are contributing to the success of this company just as much as any driver or feeder. And, this is their time. They're overdue.
I mean, he said it. I think preloaders and package or the drivers do have a special bond. The RPCDs, the regular package car drivers, those guys are the ones who had to do part-time work for years upon years before they could nail that position. I mean, I don't know how long. I think some of them have said that they've had to wait 8 to 10 years before they could go into that job. So they had to work part-time that long before they could have the opportunity to be full-time at UPS. Then in 2018, that administration, they allowed 22-4s to come into play. The 22-4s are also a full-time position paid at a lower rate. Of course, that's going to cause division. They're doing the same work that these other guys are doing for quite a significant amount less, and in turn causes a little division between the preloaders and those guys, because the 22-4s, they don't have the same perks, but they also didn't put in the grunt work as part-timers. So they don't understand what we necessarily do. We've matured together, and some people are just still learning. And I can't wait for the 22-4s to be gone so that we can all be just a little bit, love each other a little more.
Yeah, like smoothing over some of these divisions seems like a really important part of this contract, whether it's like the second-tier drivers, whether it's like bringing part-time wages up, closer to what full-timers make. Just the unity just seems so important right now. Something I wanted to ask you, Rand, and you can hop into, Misty, is, in addition to stoking divisions between workers, or trying to, the company appears to be trying to stoke divisions between workers and their customers, some of whom are workers too, probably, most of whom. So media are sounding the alarm about this quote unquote looming UPS strike. They're emphasizing all this potential damage that's going to happen and all this harm to consumers. And this sort of puts all the responsibility in the workers' camp, at least from how I understand it. But Rand, you worked as a communications coordinator during the 1997 UPS strike. I imagine that you were pushing up against this sort of framing. But how would you respond to that kind of framing? How should listeners and how should workers be responding to that kind of framing?
Well, I think Sean O'Brien's put it pretty clearly that the company's going to be striking itself, and that the burden for preventing a strike is on UPS, not on the workers. It's nice to have that clear leadership. The relationship between the customer and a driver isn't as tight as it used to be. Back in the day, the driver did the write-up of the order, essentially selling the service to the customer. Now that's all done online before the driver gets there, either for the pickup or the drop. So, but still, the relationship between the customer and the driver is a strong one. That's who they count on. And that's the person that's in their community. That's the person that's, because they have a job that's, got a decent salary and good benefits, they know that job is kind of community sustaining. Those are family wages that drivers are making. And customers understand that that's part of creating a strong economy in this country. And I think UPS consistently underestimates that relationship. They're really, they can buy all the ads they want. They can do all the social media they want. But the reality is nobody gives two hoots about corporate executives in Atlanta or, big shot, high earning managers. They see the driver, and that's who they relate to. And that's who they count on to get their packages. And that's where the sympathy of the public lies. And it's not just, think about the context right now. The writers are on strike. The actors are on strike. The nurses are on strike. Yesterday, some fast food workers at Waffle House went on strike. This country is seeing an upsurge, the title of this radio show, that, I haven't seen in my lifetime. This is a special moment in American history with a resurgent labor movement. And, UPS has got to pay attention to the context that they're bargaining in. Now's not the time to nickel and dime part-timers or to try to break this union. The public is on our side, customers are on our side, and the context has never been better.
Right. And I think maybe, the customers know their local UPS drivers, right? It's funny. I was talking about with Misty offline that we are seeing these media stories and we're hearing about UPS wanting to train supervisors to do UPSers work. What do you think about that, Misty? Is that going to work? Do you think they can do your jobs?
I think I have loved the drama this week. I like hearing it. I just don't like being in it. Okay. With management, they're all up in arms. Supposedly their bosses sent them an email and they told the managers that they had to fill out an application in order to drive. And if they did not, there would be consequences. And I kind of giggled. I'm like, well, what are the consequences? Like, how do you all feel about her treating you the same way that she treats us? Like, are you okay with this? So most of the management actually supports us, and they're lazier than, well, people say union people are lazy, but they're lazier than we are. So, I just kind of made a couple jokes and said, do you all have short term? Because when we come back, I foresee a lot of back issues. I mean, just whiny, but I don't think they'll be able to do it. I don't. What is the average volume that we push daily nationwide? The rumor is 15
20
million.
million? 20 million or so, I heard.
I don't know the actual number, but their goal is to push 5 million. I mean, on average, a part-timer alone in the building, we handle 1,000 to 1,500 packages a day or a shift within 3.5 hours. Management struggles to manage. I don't see them being able to do much else than drive a truck if they know how to fuel it. So I know that's mean. Some will, but others will struggle. Mm-hmm. And I hope that I'm standing there to watch.
Right. I want to give you guys a chance to say anything that we didn't cover that you think is important for people to know in these last really important weeks as we perhaps march towards a potential strike or a potential tentative agreement. Maybe I'll throw it to you first, Rand.
It's important that listeners understand that we're very close to a final agreement. The part-time issue is outstanding, and there's a week to resolve that, or roughly a week to get it resolved. And there's plenty of time for the company to come to its senses and reach a fair and equitable agreement with the Teamsters union. What I see as commendable right now is that the National Negotiating Committee is taking a strong stand for more than half the workforce that work part-time, and it's long overdue. That's energizing, not just for UPS Teamsters, but throughout the rest of the union and throughout the labor movement. Because, if we can elevate the work of part-timers to the real value that they create for this company, or anything approaching the real value that they create for this company, that's going to lift all workers. Because one thing we're seeing in America today and around the world is the gig economy and the level of insecurity that workers are forced to be in. Misty talked about how she has to choose between the demands of UPS and a second or third job. If corporate America had their way, they'd have everybody be part-time, everybody be an on-call gig worker. And we're standing up against that. And if we can win this contract, that's going to have such a positive impact on other Teamster contracts and on other labor agreements across the country. It's long overdue.
Misty, any last words?
I hear a lot of people, they're worried that UPS management will take our work, will do our work. And I'm not quite sure what the fear is. I guess I see it I just see a different way than they do. There are 340,000 Teamsters across the nation. I think Sean O'Brien said that over 100,000 of those were part-time. Rand, do you know?
More than half of the 340,000 Teamsters work part-time.
Okay. And they've done a pretty good job of educating. I mean, they have changed the international system. I mean, the education has improved greatly since they've taken office. And part-timers are definitely more educated and aware. There are over half that are working part-time jobs. The other half are driving, they're meeting customers. We all have families. We meet people across the nation, like talk to them. All they have to do, talk to everybody, tell everybody how UPS does you. I mean, I don't see that being a fear that people should have right now if they talk. I just don't think that should be a fear with people that, management will take over our jobs or the gig workers. Like, they can't do what we do. And if we keep the word out, then they'll support us even more.
Misty Baker and Rand Wilson, thanks for joining me on the Upsurge.
Thank you, Teddy. What a pleasure.
Thank you, Teddy. Thank you, Rand. I hope to see you all soon.
You just listened to episode 11 of The Upsurge. The Upsurge is produced in partnership with In These Times and the Real News Network. Both are nonprofit media organizations that cover the labor movement closely. Check them out at inthesetimes.com and therealnews.com, where you can also find an archive of all our past episodes. You can also show your support by sharing the episode on social media, giving us a 5-star rating, and writing a review. Follow us on Twitter at UpsurgePod and Facebook, The Upsurge. You can also listen to us on our YouTube channel, The Upsurge. But the best way to show your support is by becoming a patron of the show at patreon.com/UpsurgePod. We are listener supported and can't continue without you. You can find a link in the description. Thank you to all our Patreon supporters, but a very special thank you and shout out to our patrons at the business agent tier or higher. Shane Lynch, Greg Kerwood, Neil McDonald, Yoni Golajov, Jason Cohn, Jason Mendez, Richard Hooker, Tony Winters, David Allen, Justin Allo, Tim Peppers, Dan Arlen, Dimitri Legis, Juliet Kang, Rand Wilson, Randy Ostro, Mac Harden, Timothy Kruger, Nicole Halliday, Dee Bow, Ed Laskowski, Chris Schleiger, Corey Levesque, Martin Labutte, Dane Rawl, Jeremy Brake, Matt Cooper, Marlon Russo, Martin Omasta, DG Gozo, Dennis Hazley, Enzo N, and Andy Grote. All of your support means so much. This podcast was edited by myself. It was produced by NYGP and Ruby Walsh. Music is by Casey Gallagher. The cover art was done by Devlin Clara Recitar. I'm Teddy Ostro. Thanks for listening, and catch you next time.